up 2 hours east of here in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, and on 12 acres, my parents built our house. It was like very idyllic and beautiful. And I was one of very few Jewish people, and I felt a lot of resistance to my Jewish identity, but I felt really deeply connected to the land. And so after I was bat mitzvahed, I just said, I'm done with God, I'm done with religion, I'm done with my Jewish heritage. It's just too painful to not feel like I belong here. After I graduated undergrad, I was really kind of flailing for direction and purpose. And I read a really beautiful book called The Red Tent. And in it, I was able to claim a Jewish heritage that honored the feminine. And I realized I actually wanted to come back to Judaism, and I wanted to come back to religion and spirituality. Some of my first steps was to rejoin Jewish community, and I became a gardener at the Jewish camp of my childhood up outside of Yosemite on Miwok land. And I loved the combination of being in beautiful land and Jewish community. And I also noticed that as the gardener, I was bringing a lot of techniques for growing food that didn't really make sense in that landscape. And so I got really curious about how indigenous people tended that land since the beginning of time. And so that led me back to grad school, where I'm sitting with this like beautifully complex and painful question of what does it mean to be a Jewish person of European descent living in California and lands I love that has been stolen from indigenous people. So for me, that question can't be moved without spirituality and without the container of something greater than me. I work with an organization called Jews on Ohlone Land, and that's really my home base and my beloved community for doing this work collectively, for not just being me, Leora, trying to figure out how to have right relationships with land and indigenous people, but me, Leora, a member of a community of Jewish people who are working on this generations-long process. Segorite is a women-led indigenous land trust here in the East Bay, and Jews on Ohlone Land is one organization that's in solidarity with Segorite. So Segorite's vision is that because folks in the Bay Area are not federally recognized and do not have access to land, to take land off the speculative market to a land trust that indigenous folks have access to. So one of their really beautiful projects is called Himeka, which translates to all in one place together. And this project was born out of observing across the nation that when disasters hit, whether they're ecological disasters or economic disasters, the folks that receive support the last and the least are poor communities of color. So Segorite creates these resiliency hubs in communities, poor communities of color, so that they are ready to take care of themselves. So this looks like solar panels, water collection, herbal medicine, but what really is special and a big learning for me is that these resiliency hubs also include ritual spaces. And they acknowledge that when we go through times of chaos and catastrophe, our nervous systems will have trauma and we will need ritual to work through that trauma. And so that's a huge learning for me, to think about being prepared for disaster, including ritual and ceremony. For me, one of the silver linings, I suppose, of COVID is that whenever reality shifts or our relationship with reality shifts, there's huge openings for new ways of looking at reality and new ways of connecting to ourselves and each other. And so in COVID, I've had more time to reflect on who am I, what am I responsible for, what have I inherited, what do I want to pass on to the future generations. And I've also had many sparkles of imaginings of what could the world be if in the course of a weekend we completely changed our lives when shelter in place happened in the Bay Area. We all got together to totally shift reality. what are other ways we could all get together to totally shift reality in ways that are generative and good for this earth and each other?